Sacraments. Green Faith provides charity assistance, including medical and food throughout the year. Contact them at greenfaithministry.com.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. We are listening to Cannabis Radio, and we were just talking about the sales tax numbers and the retail sales numbers for MMJ in Colorado that were so freaking amazing on this list by county. And we'll definitely get that posted on our iCannabis Radio Facebook page. If you're not friends with us on iCannabis Radio, I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. You need to be. But just go ahead and like us on iCannabis Radio, and you'll get all kinds of news and information, as well as the ability to win some contests. But right now we're going to talk about the Denver City Council meeting today, which the subcommittee met to discuss the implementation or not of Amendment 64 in Denver.
Okay, and before we get into this, and people potentially freak out, obviously we have this chat room thing, and we're going to try to actually answer questions about this if people have them. But let's start and finish and in the middle, because that's what you're supposed to do in law school. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, and that'll burn it into their brain. This was a straw vote. Okay, this was a straw poll vote. This was not the final decision by Denver, the largest city in Colorado, to opt in to recreational sales. This was a straw poll.
Meaning it was not an actual vote. It was just an opinion poll to see where people stood.
Yes, and it was very informative information came out of this, really interesting. But this was the start, not the end, because a whole bunch of people went on Facebook and were like, la-di-da, the Denver opted in, the largest city, we're the first. No, not yet. And again, I think we will. It just, we don't want to lose public comment during the next 3, 4, 5 months that it's going to take the city to figure out what they really want to do.
And here's what's going to happen with that. So here's what's really important. So the reason why we want people to know so desperately that it was a straw poll and not the actual vote is because
you can be the mean one.
You still need to contact your city council folks and tell them that you want to see a regulated adult use marijuana sales system in Denver, because what's going to happen is all the people who are opposed to this system are going to hear that straw poll, and the straw poll was overwhelmingly in favor of opting in, and they're going to contact their council people, and council people can change their mind. So the battle has not ended. In fact, it just began, and we have to make sure that we let our council people know that we agree with their straw poll numbers, and they should continue in that way.
Well, and before we begin the actual discussion of the details, want to start with, the basic timeline is that by July 1st, or before, Med, with 1M now, is going to come out with the micro rules for recreational weed. Okay? So that's July 1st.
I don't think you can call it weed, babe.
Whatever. In just under a month. Okay? And then at some point, you will see Denver follow up with their own rules. Okay? But they talked about today a long, hot summer of decision-making, yada, yada, yada. The thing we know is we have an October 1st deadline for the current businesses to switch over and also be recreational businesses. And so Denver will have to figure out what they're doing before that October 1st deadline.
Gotcha.
So I'll always keep that in mind. And yes, it was not the final decision today. So to give an overview, I'll start with the end rather than the beginning. The meeting today had Med starting first and a bunch of city council people, particularly Charlie Brown, ripping the crap out of Med and talking to them about what I got. I'll switch to my other sheets because the Brown quote was too good. He wanted to assure us that there will be no repeat of what happened with medical marijuana.
Charlie Brown wants there to be no...
Well, and he was asking that directly to Barbara, who's the head of the Department of Revenue.
Yeah.
And it was awesome because in a display of classic government, she turned to Laura Harris, the head of Med, and said, I'll let Laura handle that. And then Laura, instead of answering yes or no, said, let me read to you what I read to the legislature. And went on a 5-10 minute diatribe about, what changes they've made, and that's all positive. As, we've expressed the opinions we're about to express are those of Waren Edson alone and not of Cannabis Radio, our host of the station. Yada, yada, yada. I hope before we tax the crap out of the consumer that we'll make sure med is running efficiently and not waste our money on having twice as many vehicles, twice as many offices, twice as many $2,500 chairs as we have employees.
And super ridiculous, stupid, expensive rent.
So, we just had this fabulous back and forth, starting with Charlie, big rip into med, no assurances, yada, yada. Med does a nice job of covering their butt. And one of the key points Med talks about is that they will have rules by July 1st, 2013, the micro rules for the recreational, and then they will quickly follow up with new medicinal rules. They will look very similar.
How's that possible?
And they will not take public comment.
Oh, well, that's how it's possible.
So
because they're not going to take public comment.
And they have 1,000 plus or minus of the licensees done right now. They have 300 plus or minus pending, which means I guess the other 1,020 disappeared in the last 3 years. Because I know we had approximately 2,320 back in August 2010. No, August 2000. Yeah, exactly. Back when everybody applied for that 1-year license.
Gotcha.
So, we had Charlie having fun. We have Miss Rob from District 10 say she was supportive. Now, it was fascinating to her do this weird thing where she talked about how her people were supportive, but she'd heard a lot of information that they weren't sure what they'd voted for. So she didn't want to repeat the numbers by which her people supported 64 and instead took her own poll. And in her own poll, she put it up briefly so that it didn't have a chance to move across the city or out of state and get tainted. And in her poll, it was pretty much split 50-50 for opting in. But overall, she's supportive.
And that's right. And that's Congress Park, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my eyes rolled back in my head and almost stuck. My mom would be proud. But, then Nevitt talked about how he's in and the will of the voter. We had Nish talk about it. She's supportive overall.
Who was?
Robin Nish, right?
Yeah.
And
she's
I
an
always
at-large.
get her name wrong. At large. Mm-hmm. Now, she was upset because everybody had talked about a moratorium, which I found interesting choice
that's
of
a dirty.
words.
That's a dirty word now.
And she talked about a transition period.
It's like saying horatorium.
Wait, I don't even know what that is. Let's not go there.
That's my idea for the next.
Wait, today's Monday.
It's
Sex
Tuesday.
Pot's Tuesday.
Right.
And then we.
Sorry, babe, I got you on moratorium.
Poor councilperson Lopez in District 3. 1,000 feet isn't far enough because he has neighborhoods overrun with MMCs right now.
And he does. I mean, he has the federal corridor, and but he has more liquor stores. And titty bars.
In the soon shows, let's get out all the various maps we have around here and look at the chaos that was federal and what we have now. But yada 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 yada. He was not going to vote to opt out, but wanted to make sure everybody know they were going to have to vote him, convince him to opt in for the final vote. Again, getting back to this was not the frigging final vote. So particularly if you live in District 3, please call Councilperson Lopez and say you should support 64. But anyway, he was concerned about the saturation of the neighborhood. And then,
I have to say that when they first talked about this several months ago, when they decided to have a subcommittee and those kinds of things, Paul Lopez, I was there, it was recorded, talked about how, he the will of the voters, and this is so great, and he'd rather have this than liquor stores and those kinds of things. And he was
pro-medical, and he said that. But he said that he was concerned that this would go the liquor store route. Now, there was a whole lot of grandstanding throughout a whole bunch of this stuff where and it's kind of funny because, sometimes Mr. Broadwell and I don't see eye to eye. He's a city city attorney for Denver, and gave a presentation. Gave the presentation that tied all the summary together. But he gets so frustrated when they visibly, like you can see on camera, when they act like there's a whole bunch of these by schools. And they act like the new ones are going to come in right next to the schools. And they act like they're going to all line up along Federal, one after the other, and all the new ones are going to be next. And
then they're going to lasso people on the street corner, and they're going to pull them in. And
whatever. You're talking like this isn't even reefer madness stuff. This is just like the simply
not understanding that there's
rules already say you can't. Right. The people who invested a shitload of money in this got letters from the feds and moved out. most people probably aren't going to move in next to schools again. So the only reason you're talking about moving in next to schools is if you really don't know what you're talking about, or you're just trying to get a nice political soundbite.
Sure, you want to
out
be able
there.
to tell your constituents, I said
And-
at this committee meeting that we were not going to have any more of these things next to schools. I said at
Oh.
this committee meeting that we are not going to have more than the liquor stores. You're right. It's grandstanding.
yeah,
It's absolutely
and-
being able to repeat to your constituents when you're on the campaign trail.
So, Councilperson Lopez had a little bit of that. Okay, and
I like him,
you
by the
know,
way.
Councilperson Brooks, frankly, had just a little bit of that. And I'll get to Miss Montero in a minute because I'm
Ooh, let's get
Shepherd.
to her.
Okay, no, well, Shepherd was fascinating. She kept referring to herself as the 80211 district, which was D1. And she said originally she had the most retail stores, and now she doesn't. And she said that came through just weeding themselves out. And I'm doing the quotes because she did.
It's funny
And
right there, weeding themselves out.
she
Get it,
said-
Bike? Do you get that? Bike, do you get...
Well, she had two cool things, though. She talked about ads and how when the twirling ads went away out front in the street, that she stopped getting complaints. And she's talked about that she and some officers, and she actually named them, but I won't, had indicated that they anticipated increased crime, and there wasn't. And you heard me say that. There was not.
I hope
And then
there's...
she had an interesting thing where she didn't want to talk about, she refused to opt in to it because she didn't want to opt into the will of the voters. And she was like, that just doesn't make sense. Why should I do, I do what the will of the voters, I'm not going to opt in. Wow, cool. That was really interesting.
Wait, I don't understand.
To opt into 64, she didn't think that should even be a discussion.
Oh, because
Yeah.
the voters... I'm sorry.
And so she
you're
found
right,
it like
right.
weirdly, and she didn't use the word insulting, but that was kind of
The voters said this, we shouldn't be having a discussion about it. We
about opting in or opting out.
we should do what our-
It's the will of the voters, and I refuse to opt in to the will of the voters. I do what the will.
Right, because
Really
it's called being a
cool.
public servant.
Well,
you serve
again,
the public.
She
that is
said
us.
that, and
Good
you
for
know,
her. Thank you. Who
we
was that
heard-
again?
That was Shepherd.
Excellent.
And Councilperson Brooks forgot her name and introduced her as someone else. That was kind of sucked.
That's okay.
And
Elvis,
then,
don't you worry your pretty little head about that.
At large, Debbie Ortega was all over the place, and she agreed with Councilperson Lopez about saturation. But then it got fun because she talked about, she wanted to make sure we tracked the social costs. And I kicked back in the chair kind of saying yes. And then she kind of got there because she started with la-di-da, the reefer madness crap, let's track the kids. But I'm like, cool, because let's see where it really goes. And then she said, let's track the health consequences. I was like, okay, let's do that. Let's do that. And then finally she said, let's check the incarceration rate. Wow.
Debbie
okay.
Ortega said this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, someone got in her ear.
Wow. Okay.
I wonder if it was our friend Matt Brown.
Now, granted, later she wrapped around to the most, something that I wanted to highlight here, because it was later when City Attorney Broadwell was speaking and said, "Don't ask questions," and she did. Save the questions to the end. Everybody ask questions. It was like grade school. I flashed back to being a substitute teacher in, third grade. No, I just told you not to do that.
Hands in your lap. Hands in your lap, everybody.
Yeah.
Hands in your lap.
At the end. Look at the clock.
When I say
But
end,
anyway.
you may then raise your hands and ask questions.
This was a big issue, and she wanted to highlight and star, her words, not mine, this big issue, and it was public use.
Okay.
And it was public use in the 16th Street Mall, and it was public use particularly around kids. And then she kind of ended it at that, and part of me, because earlier she talked about like alcohol, had me thinking, how many places on the 16th Street Mall have outdoor seating where everybody's drinking?
Yeah, but when you walk by, you don't smell the booze necessarily. You don't, it's not, it's more subtle. I know what you're saying, but it's definitely more subtle.
I guess, and
It
it
is.
is. But great. So next to that's the tobacco smoking pit, with a little stand-up thing that looks like a parking meter that everybody's putting their cigarette butts in, and they empty it once every 2 months.
I find that vile as all get out.
But,
you know
but
that.
hey,
Absolutely.
and if you go by the big buildings on 17th Street in the financial district, you got 50 floors of people dumping their butts there. But anyway, we'll keep going. So we had Councilperson Brooks from our very own District 8. He pointed out that his district was number 2.
We're number 2.
The pro
We're
64 districts was 67%.
Yay.
It was kind of fascinating to hear him speak about how he wanted to lead the nation in recreational marijuana rules and be the city.
That's what Elvis said?
Yes. I was almost happy he kicked my ass. But anyway, that's again, a whole nother show. And then he snuck in some Albusisms where he left us hanging like any good, movie or TV show, where he talked about how he was going to work out a plan, how this was going to create sustainable family housing and solve that crisis, as well as he wanted to know more about how are you exhaling? And that was how he put it. And then he said, we're going to have a lot of tourists. Where are they going to be smoking?
How are you exhaling?
Yes. And again, I wrote that down specifically.
How are you exhaling?
Yeah.
How are you, folks that are listening right now? How are you exhaling? Let me know.
We'll finish with George's favorite, and that was Councilperson Judy Montero. And as much as it's disappointing that the voters in District 9 keep reelecting Miss Montero, it was really fun. And you should all go to the City Council website if you want to see this and watch the replays of her going through her little spiel on this, because she says, I'm in District 9, and I'll have to say that my district supported Amendment 64 at 68%, the highest of any district.
Holla!
And then she goes on to say that within her district is Sun Valley, which has the highest rate of kids per home and the highest number of kids in poverty. And they supported it 82.66%, and she just doesn't understand. That's a quote.
Wait.
Okay.
So wait, she was
It was awesome.
She was